to the rhythm, catching every beat. Together we embrace the futures at our feet. The futures at our feet.
Welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. It is wonderful to be with you, and we have got a guest who's going to be joining us very, very soon. Actually, you can probably see him on screen if you're watching. Who's joining us from the other side of the pond, but he's originally from this side of the pond, and we'll let him tell his story very, very soon. Steve, are you well? Another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. Are you well?
Yeah, new location, everybody. You can see I'm in a kitchen now. I'm in a new space, moved in a few weeks ago now, so it's work in progress and everything else. But yeah, the sun's shining, the birds are tweeting. The world is all good, isn't it? Can't complain. I'm excited for this one. Excited for this one.
Well, we are joined by Andy Hargreaves, and he is joining us, like I said, from the other side of the pond, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. And obviously, he's got a new, not obviously, but it's another partnership with Crown House Publishing, another publisher and another author that's going to tell stories of their work in education and their thoughts about the future education as well. So, Andy Hargreaves, thanks for joining us on the Edufuturists podcast. Please give us a little bit of an insight into you and your background.
I live in Ottawa in Canada. I've had a somewhat complicated life. I grew up in Accrington in Lancashire, where Ben is right now, I think, more or less.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the border there at Oswald-Twistle. I lived in England until I was in my late 30s. So I grew up in Accrington, went to university, taught for a short while, went into teacher training universities, then moved to Canada, where my two brothers already were in 1987. We spent 16 years in Canada, 16 in Boston in the United States. And we moved back to Canada 6-7 years ago. We've got 3 grandchildren here, 2 more in Hong Kong. They're just visiting. So that is like the overall pattern of where I've been and what I've been doing. If you want to unpack any of that, you're quite welcome to ask me.
I think the Accrington thing definitely needs unpacking, and Steve was going to go there, but I'm going there because I'm an Accrington boy, so it's okay. So actually, you went to the school that I first taught at in Accrington.
Indeed,
in its original iteration. And when we were planning this podcast, that kind of came out. And I know you wrote a book about some of that experience as well, didn't you? So Accrington to Canada, like there must be some differences, right?
So I wrote a book in 2020 called Moving, which is about social mobility, really, both the upsides and the problems. It came out in the middle of COVID, so absolutely nobody read it because nobody read anything during COVID. But I started off wanting to write a narrative about everything, basically. But when I'm writing them, I'm really thinking not just about unpacking my inner psyche, but thinking what is there in here that's of use to other people. Now, for a long time, I didn't think I had anything to write or anything to say about my life. I just kind of got on with my work and did it, basically. When you grow up in Accrington, you think you're all right, but you think you're nothing special. And it's not particularly worth writing about. Who writes biographies? Famous people, actors, sports stars, business people, or people who've had remarkable lives, grew up in the woods, raised by wolves, or whatever it might be. Well, I grew up in Accrington. I wasn't quite raised by wolves, but we started off pretty much from the age of 5. We moved from a small rented terrace house up onto the Ferngore council estate. We actually moved on the back of a coal lorry because we couldn't afford a furniture van. And that's one of my earliest memories. We did all right. We were low income, went to a school then called Spring Hill Primary School, now Spring Hill Community School. And we were low income, but we did all right. My dad was a manager of about 5 or 6 people in a small chemist warehouse in Blackburn. My mum did a working class job. She cleaned people's houses, looked after people's children and so on. I had a great teacher in primary school. I've written about her and talked about her quite a bit. Mary Hindle, she's a legend in the history of Spring Hill. She was in the newspapers and lots of things. And when I was about 11 in her class, I was just incredibly inspired by her and wanted to be the kind of teacher that she was. She was, in 1961, she was incredibly innovative. We did a lot of projects. We did nature study. We did drama. We wrote our own newspapers. I did the travel section, even though I'd never been anywhere, but I actually traveled in my own head. She did all that alongside handling, the basics, multiplication tables, spelling, writing, all that. And she seems to have a really good balance between the two. Later in life, I've been diagnosed as adult ADHD, which is in many ways an asset, but also a difficulty. And we had no label for it then, but she sort of got the kind of kid I was, which is a bit mouthy sometimes, a tendency to sit in the back corner and have a few scrapes here and there. And she knew who I was and she accepted who I was and could work with it, which not all teachers could, but didn't let me get away with too much so that it negatively affected the other people around us. She was such an inspiration for me that actually when the school built a new building in, when would it be? About 2004. They asked me back to lay the foundation stone for Spring Hill Primary School. And if you go in now, there's like a big stone there behind a curtain and you can find my name on it and so on. And I said I'd do it provided I could do it with my best teacher, Mary Hindle. So she came in her mid-80s. By that time, we did it all together. It was a fantastic occasion. It was great for me. It was even better for her. So everything was going pretty swimmingly. I got past the 11 plus, went to grammar school. My brothers didn't. They ended up working in factories, Howard and Buller's and other places. I went on to grammar school. I had a good first year in grammar school. I was like in the top stream. I was in the top 5, top stream. Everything was going great. Then my dad died when I was 12, and everything started to fall apart. My mum kind of struggled on with 3 jobs for a while. She got very sick. She got mentally sick. She got physically sick. Her brothers were in factories. One of them emigrated. It was basically down to me to take care of the family, really. So from being top of the class, I went to near the bottom. I had 50 absences in one term. I've still got the reports. I never showed up at school before about 11 o'clock. And the thing is, Ben and Steve, is that, we're going back to boys' grammar schools in the 1960s. And I never knew that the school knew anything about this, didn't know that the school knew until the truancy officer showed up. We had a curriculum that wasn't particularly engaging. The history curriculum didn't connect with me or my life or anything that I was interested in. So I struggled in school for a few years until my mum kind of got herself back together and I could reinvest in what was going on there. So the sum total of all that is that when I went to university, I had it in mind pretty early on that I wanted to go actually into teacher training. I wanted to be the kind of teacher that Mary Hindle was and to not be the kind of teacher that my secondary school teachers were. And to try and develop teachers who were more inspiring, more engaging, more inclusive, and that's how I ended up sort of where I am today. So it is a story about social mobility, but it's not a rags to riches or pulling yourselves up by your bootlaces. It looks at the complications that many kids go through today. They're not always working class kids. Sometimes they're immigrant kids. They may be taking care of the parents instead of taking care of them. They may be taking care of the brothers and sisters. So for people who've gone through that, or for people who teach kids who are going through that, I think this is a book that can speak to them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the thing that when you were telling that story actually is there is a greater repeat absenteeism, as we would call it. Those people, those learners, those young people that are not engaged
No.
in education and not turning up till 11, all those kind of thing. And actually, they all just get encompassed in that whole terminology of, whether naughty kids or disengaged kids. And
Yeah.
actually, there's a whole reason and a whole explanation actually behind probably every one of those cases. And actually, as public sector's been squeezed in regards to its investment, the ability and maybe the effort and the want to do it as well, and the bothersness is actually what those reasons are, to find out why those people are absent from education, what the reasons and how we can unpick it, has probably become less and less, even from when you started writing it and doing those things, and in terms of your research, that maybe in the last 15, 20 years, everything's a case of, well, they're just naughty kids. They're just truanting. They just don't want to be in school. But actually, it
Indeed.
could be the
Yeah.
curriculum. It could be being young carers. It could be all of these other things, but it could be none. It could be the fact that they just don't want to. But actually, unless you take the time to get to know, you're never going to know. And you're just going to put everybody in the same terminology as regular offenders.
Well, I advise a couple of governments, Steve. One is Scotland, where I'll be in a couple of months, and the other one is province of New Brunswick in Canada, and they both got, like many other systems, a lot of problems with absenteeism, chronic absenteeism during that got exaggerated during COVID, but it was starting to build up even before COVID, and the first visceral responses are really two things: sanctions and expectations, and interventions. So, frankly, I could have done with an intervention in my home, so it wasn't all the problem of the curriculum and so on. But the thing is in during COVID, a lot of people questioned their relationship with school. It broke the habit. It broke lots of habits, actually. My first speeches after COVID were hideous because I lost the habit of giving public speeches. The first meetings I went to were hideous because adults forgot how to behave in meetings. We think the kids forgot how to behave. No, the adults forgot how to behave as well. And so since COVID, two things have happened: is with people have walked away. The kids are walking away, and the teachers are walking away too. And we're finding it harder to recruit them. We're finding it harder to keep them. And they're not two different problems. They're the same problem. And so we really have to start asking, especially as AI is coming along and other things that will really disrupt what's going on in schools. We have to ask what the learning feels like and what the teaching feels like. We have to pull people in rather than pushing them in. And I think a lot of people haven't got hold of that yet. But that's really what we need to get to grips with.
And I think a lot of that ties into a lot of the work and research you've done around engagement. And we've often said, and we've had many people on the podcast previously who have talked about whether attendance as a measure, days in school, doesn't necessarily mean engagement, but that's the measure. A lot of the measure that's seen. Achievement doesn't always mean engagement because there's a lot of passive learning that happens.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that, then I wonder what's your kind of research showed there? What have you found there around the draw and the pull? Because it's really interesting when you mentioned Mary Hindle. Like, we've all got examples of that, of teachers that have got who and tying back to Howell Roberts' thing that Steve mentioned there about botheredness, and about teachers who really gave one, who really cared about their kids and cared about something. So what's the student engagement piece look like for you, Andy?
Well, the opposite of absence is not attendance. The opposite of absence is presence. And presence isn't just physical presence. It is cognitive and emotional and behavioral presence as well. It's being fully present, fully there, whether you're a teacher, a kid, or anyone else. So, if you imagine this as a 2x2 grid, you can be absent from school, but present in your learning, because your at-home learning is absolutely great, and there's more going on there than there is going on in school. You can be present in school but absent in your learning, so you can be physically there, but you've really got no connection to what's going on or what you're being asked to do. um, you can be missed both. You can be not there and not present. And what you want to be, of course, is in school a lot, because then you're with other people. You're in a community. School isn't just about maths and physics and reading. It's also about learning how to be. Learning, not just learning what to do, but learning how to be in society. And so we want people who are fully engaged. Now, there's loads of books on engagement. It's not that teachers don't know how to engage kids. There's most of them already know how to do that in all kinds of ways, and there's a million books on giving you other great ideas on how to engage your kids. What is different about our book, because we are not psychologists by background, but we're more sort of social scientists or social psychologists, is the stuff getting in the way. The stuff getting in the way of what it is that teachers want to do with their kids. And we talk about 5 of these. We call them the 5 enemies of student engagement. So it helps people think not just about what can I pull out of my bag that I can do with my kids tomorrow that I don't do today, but what's making me not be the teacher I really want to be with my kids. And we talk about 5 of these just very quickly, if I can remember them off the top of my head. They all begin with dis, because I like alliteration a lot. So one is disenchantment, that's loss of magic. So there's magic there, you see it in very young kids, and then somebody steals the magic. And what is it that steals the magic? It's too much testing, too many exams, too much standardization, too much prescription, too many 3-part lessons. So we need to get the magic back. And we have to take some of those things away a little bit or ease them up in order to get the magic back. There's disconnection, which is you don't feel any connection with what you're being asked to study or asked to know about. This doesn't mean that everything should be relevant to your local community, but whatever it is, whether it's dragons, Harry Potter, or whatever, the teacher has a way of being able to help you to see how this connects to you, your interests, your like interests you already have, or interests you might get that you don't know are out there for you. There's disassociation, which is lack of belonging. We often treat belonging as fitting in, but fitting in means you have to fit into what it is the school wants, to one way of fitting in. If you're different, that's a bit difficult. So we need to think of ways of including many different kinds of kids in our learning, in our curriculum, in our schools. Differences by class, by gender, by generation, by all kinds of things. There's disruption, which is technology. We're seeing a lot of that now. So who spends most time on screens, which is the lower your socioeconomic level, the more time you spend on screens. And people say AI will be the answer to the future because kids can learn their maths faster, but with AI than they can with a teacher. Well, those are usually kind of privileged, already motivated kids and don't have teachers who know how to get them inspired and motivated. So there's a lot about how we have a more balanced relationship with technology, and disempowerment, which is just like a voice in, whether you stand up, whether you sit down, whether you can move around, whether you can not move around, what you study, what you learn, what you're interested in is the stuff that you can steer rather than your school or the national curriculum steering it all the time and so on. So these are like the 5 enemies. And we think if schools can get to grips with that, they can start to figure out, what is blocking what they really want to do and seize hold of it and get a grip and start getting the kids inspired more.
And does the research demonstrate of any of those 5 that are more prominent than others, or actually the starting point, or anything else? And also the pushback from many educators and actually many organisations would be actually the ability to remove away from a test is a systemic thing. I would disagree potentially and say, well, the end point is absolutely you can do anything different but you still have to be shackled by the endpoint exam. Does that make sense? Because so many people go, well, we can't change because ultimately we've just got preparing for the test. You don't. You just have to get them to learn so that ultimately, hopefully, the results would be great. But ultimately, if that's the only benchmark and the only point, and that's your North Star, getting them to pass the grades, that's the issue. But are you finding that? Is that some of the feedback? And also, is there any of those 5 that you just talked about that are key indicators of how do we engage or age group, anything that's...
If any of you follow me on X, so I have 41,000 followers on X. Most of them are dead, I think, but technically they're still followers. And you'll see that I'm spending a bit of time going around and visiting the graves of people, of famous thinkers who influenced me. And one is a sociologist called Max Weber. Max Weber is famous for a few things. He invented the idea of the Protestant ethic that kind of drove capitalism. And he also pretty much invented the concept of bureaucracy. So the fact that bureaucracy is part of our everyday language now, we have Max Weber in the 1920s, this German guy to thank for that. Max Weber thought bureaucracy was not altogether a bad thing. It meant you got promoted according to your abilities. There was fairness. There was impartiality. You didn't have Nepo babies, although we didn't use the term Nepo babies then, or families, or corruption, or Trump families, or Clinton families, or, whatever they might be passing on their privileges. So bureaucracy wasn't altogether bad, but he said what happened is, and tests and exams are part of that. They're part of meritocracy. But he said that it tends to become an iron cage. So what's meant to be a framework becomes a cage that starts to restrain you. And then everybody starts behaving as if it is a kind of prison, that you have to prepare for the exams, that you have to spend a lot of your time trying to remember things you don't really want to remember, that you'll forget pretty much as soon as you've taken the exam. So I don't think we should abolish exams. I don't think, I think tests are important. High stakes tests are a whole issue altogether, because they lead to corruption in all kinds of ways within the system. But I think systems can change. So recently I did a review for the OECD of Ireland. And one consequence of that review is that Ireland's final exam, sit-down exam, used to determine 100% of your future. And from the near future, it will determine no more than 60 or 70%. And the government's changed that, but because of our review. So people who say they can't change this, they're wrong. We can change it, and big systems do, and they're across a very small pond, which is the North Sea, rather than the Irish Sea, I should say, rather than the Atlantic. But we've seen lots of examples in schools, including in places like Singapore, which are very tested, where teachers as a community come to believe if they do the right things with their kids, and the kids are really learning at a high level and can figure things out, that sort of the results will look after themselves. Not completely, but a lot of the getting the results to look after themselves is just making the stuff so you want to remember it, not so that you just have to remember it. And then it tends to stick, and then you tend to do better on the tests.
That piece there about wanting to remember it rather than having to remember it, that really lands with me. It also reminds me of a conversation we had with Darren Coxon about schools being the places that young people want to go to rather than have to go to.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting one. And I've got a 14-year-old and 11-year-old daughters, and they are compliant children. They are polite, relatively mature, academic, but I do think sometimes they think, what is the point? And in fact, I don't think that. I know that. And I suppose the way that I'm sat now as a somebody on the outside of education, so to speak, trying to do things in and on education rather than just as a teacher at the chalk face, it frustrates me when we focus on the things sometimes that less important, and it feels less important. The measures, the numbers, the grades, the badges of honour, the technology even, and we are proponents of using technology, like I know you are, but in an appropriate way, and in a considered way. It just feels like we're majoring on minors. And one of the things that really landed when we're thinking about the conversation here and speaking to you, because you've written extensively, you've obviously been in the space and got a lot of influence. You've seen lots of school systems around the world. And one thing that I know comes up a lot in the work that you write is about identity and belonging. And you started off this conversation talking about how your identity shifted and then has shifted again from moving one country to another country, but also from having a working class work ethic, and then being an academic, and then being a teacher of teachers, and then being like your identity is tied into that. And from the engagement piece to the relevancy of curriculum, tying into identity and belonging, there's got to be something that we can do, that if we can allow young people to be seen, learners to be seen and understand who they are, and the being thing that you talked about previously, then surely the academic achievements, their success, their well-being, their belonging, their place in the world would supercharge as well. Is that kind of the basis of where you are?
If you can't see yourself in some way within your school, then it's very hard to be successful. If you can't see yourself in a country, it's very hard to feel like you belong. I sometimes break out into song at this moment, but I'll spare you that. But George Michael, whose grave I visited, which is in Highgate Cemetery, just about 3 minutes walk from Karl Marx's grave. So Karl Marx and George Michael are in the same cemetery, which says something. I don't quite know what it does, but it says something. And in Careless Whisper, before, which he wrote before he came out publicly as being gay, it has this incredible line, which is, "Guilty feet have got no rhythm. Guilty feet have got no rhythm." If you're guilty or ashamed of who you are, it affects your rhythm, and that affects you. That affects how you are with other people, and it affects other people as well. So there are 3 wrong ways to think about identity. Well, there are 4. One is to not think about it. Two is to think that it's just about fitting in. So whatever group you belong to, you have to do it on their terms. I worked for 5 years as a lecturer at Oxford University. I have fantastic relationships with the local education authority, Tim Brighouse and all these people. I hated the university, as an Accrington lad teaching in a University of Oxford. I never felt I belonged, because Oxford wants you to belong, but it wants you to belong on its terms, and not on anybody else's terms. I think the third mistake that we make with identity is we treat it as a tick box approach. So we make a list of people and types who we think are oppressed, and say are oppressed, and they usually are. And then we have a week or a month or a book or a piece of the curriculum, and then we think we've dealt with it and we've got it out the way. And fourth is, because of that, we tend to divide the world into 2 sets of people. And I think the left is partly responsible for this, and has opened and has created the trapdoor that Nigel Farage and Donald Trump have opened. And what it is dividing the world simplistically into those who are unambiguously privileged and those who are unarguably oppressed. And it's important to confront oppression, marginalization, exclusion, wherever they exist. But it's also important to understand that for all of us, it is complicated. So I am elderly. I know that's a complete surprise to you, but I am elderly. And in a university culture, sometimes as a white male, that's a problem. In North American restaurants, it definitely is. If you're elderly, they'll move you to the back of the restaurant with your table next to the toilets or the galleys, because they don't want people who are practically zombies sitting in the front window, discouraging all the millennials and Gen X's and so on from coming in and spending the money. But if I was in an indigenous culture or an East Asian or South Asian culture, I'd be revered as somebody who's elderly. So it can be the same thing, but it can mean very different things in very different places. Growing up in Accrington, you're part of the working class. There's loyalty, there's hard work, there's honesty, and people have also in the past tended to be a little bit suspicious of outsiders. And by outsiders, I mean people from Yorkshire or people from 10 miles away. And, all the phobias are kind of part of that if you start to understand it, that way. People need freedom of religion. It's freedom of faith, freedom of worship, but there are branches of all three Abrahamic religions that are homophobic and patriarchal. And head teachers have no idea what to do about that when it comes across the desk. And they tend to run away from it. And I've been in England and other places speaking about how to get the courage to not run away from it, but to turn into it and, face the fear and deal with it with integrity. So what is the answer to identity? I'll just give you a couple. One is the most important thing is not to say that there are no differences, but the differences are complicated, and you have to respond to the whole child, and it takes the whole school to know the whole child. We can't all do it individually if you've got 100 kids to teach. So and there are many things to identity, including my granddaughters, who were two of my granddaughters, the twins. Being twins is a very important part of their identity. So we need to, ironically, in dealing with identity and ticking boxes, we've made some people feel they belong, but we've made other people who feel like they don't belong. And they're going to Andrew Tate. And they're going to other places because they're not feeling included. So schools have to be places which make everybody feel like they belong in their fullness and their complexity. It takes the whole school to know the whole child. And part of that is something I learned from Ontario here when I began working in the issue of inclusion, way back in about 16 years ago. And that is what people here call essential for some, good for all. And that is what's essential for some kids is often quite good for all kids. So technology first came in schools actually with special needs. Text to sound, sound to text, and things like that. That's often good. That's often good for all kids. If you welcome immigrants, you can create a habit of welcoming, including, kids who've got divorced parents and come and live with the dad for a while rather than living with the mum, military kids, kids who move house because of their parents' job. So it creates a habit of welcoming everyone. And here, respecting our Indigenous peoples is a really important part of what it means to be Canadian. And the things that are great for Indigenous communities, like learning outdoors, for example, is a huge part of the spiritual and natural life of our Indigenous communities. Well, learning outdoors is great for everybody. Just open the door; it's free. It's good emotionally, it's good physically, and it actually turns out to be good cognitively as well. So I think just a little switch every school can turn on is that when they got this group of kids who they feel are excluded, and they're trying to think, what can they do? Then think, in what ways is what we're doing for these kids good for all kids? I think vocational education, hands-on learning, working class kids, good for working class kids. It's actually good for all kids. And if you do it for all kids, they can become leaders of the other kids. and not just be behind them on the academics.
I think it really resonates in terms of that thing that you just said in terms of inclusion, Ben. You've talked about it often, and I know you deliver it in your keynotes and all that kind of thing in terms of necessity of some, but beneficial for all, and around those words. But ultimately, also, we've kind of set on this pick and mix education that actually, to identify and make belonging isn't about, for you have to do something different because I don't think it sits. It's actually, you know what, regardless of who you are, giving you more choice of how you learn, the reasons why you learn, what you learn, in all of the different guises in terms of the purpose of education and everything else that goes with it. Choice is key. And actually, and the ability to go into Woolworths when it existed, or any pick and mix, we're all from council estates or from the north, so we don't go into the one at the cinema because it's too expensive. We bring our own pick and mix. But ultimately, the ability to make a bag up of things that you like, but also all of the things, I think is key. What everybody's bag is unique. I think education has to become that and give options. We have to put guardrails in place to guide and make sure that people, but if you give them everything, they won't know what they want to do. I think we underestimate the ability of children to know what they want at times as well. But I think that definitely resonated when you said, well, we're not just going to say, well, if you don't go to university, you can do an apprenticeship. Well, maybe you do both. Maybe you do university first and you do an apprenticeship. Maybe you do an apprenticeship rather than GCSE. To all of these things
exactly
is the option and the ability of choice.
Yeah.
And our mechanism of educators and the education system has to curate better those choices and present them in a way that people understand it at that level, in a way that they understand it. It might not be flat text, it might be in a shop. All of those things in terms of we need to be just better at giving choices, opportunities, and options.
So I agree with everything you've said, Steve. But I'm also aware of a big monster called the Daily Mail, or anybody who reads it coming down from the right say, oh yeah, we can let kids choose what they want to do. They can study dinosaurs for 10 years or right. So you
would love that, by the way.
So we've heard. Well, actually, there is somebody who passed away not long ago, Kieran Egan, who wrote a fantastic book called Learning in Depth. He actually got a group of schools, including a lot in Latin America, but some in other places, with this basic idea, which is a bit extreme. And it is when you're in infant school, there's a ceremony, and you go on stage, and the teacher gives you an envelope, and you open it, and inside is a topic that you will study for the rest of the time you're at school. Now, that's not the only thing, but you'll do something on it every week. It says you have to think a bit about the topic. So it might be things like apples, or dust is one of the ones. Can you imagine, like, you're 5 years old, you open an envelope, you've got to study dust for the rest of your life. But there's, dust in religion, dust in geology, dust in narrative. And it says that by the age of about 8, the kids start to know more than their teachers and become experts, and then the teacher's job is to kind of guide them. You can curate it digitally and so on. So you're right. It's not such a terrible idea to study dinosaurs for 10 years, but roughly I like to think of a kind of third rule. It's approximate, but a third of the time, find ways do the Ken Robinson thing and find ways for kids to pursue something they're passionate about and interested in already and that they want to explore further. But there's a second third, which is which we've seen in a big project. We had a $2.7 million project recently funded by the Lego Foundation to create more innovation that would engage kids in school who were marginalized after COVID, and kind of get their mental health better and their engagement and achievement better. And we found the number of schools, what they did was on a Friday, magically it was always on a Friday, they'd organize classes, this is in the middle years, so, age about 11, 12, 13, they'd organize classes around teachers' interests. And we got all kinds of stuff, we got like magic tricks, knitting, Minecraft, ice climbing, all kinds of things. So so sometimes it's great to follow something that you don't know you're interested in yet, but you can sign up for. But your teacher's really excited about this, and it's great for the teachers, because I defy any teacher to be unable to find something that they don't normally get a chance to teach. And they say, right, Fridays you'll teach anything you like. If you're a triathlete or whatever, off you go. You can do that. And then a third of the time is stuff you have to do because you don't know you need it yet, but you're probably going to need it later on. And some of that sucks. Some of that sucks. I tell my grandchildren this: some of what you do in school, in life, will suck. Climbing up to the top of the mountain in the rain, it sucks, part of it. But I do that quite a lot because I like the experience of what it's like when I get to the top. So if you have the other two things, and if not all of what you have to do sucks, then it's easier for kids to persevere from I don't know, like long division. Although I've no idea why we teach long division these days, but long division would be a good example, and they're more likely to persist with that if they can follow their own interests. They've got a teacher who's incredibly excited about something they've signed up for. And if teachers have ways of making much but not all of the rest of it feel engaging, then they can grit the teeth and bear it for what's left.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and it'd be very interesting to see an education system that would be brave enough to try something like that. It'd be, and I think as we're talking here, we've got to 40 odd minutes, and we could definitely double that, triple that, and we want to definitely have another conversation about where we go. But we always finish our episodes with quick fire questions, and somebody who is as learned and I suppose the wisdom that just comes out, the thoughts that just come out. You threw things out, and I've written 5 or 6 things down as you're talking. I want to see where the quick fire questions go with these. So we've got 3. I do one, Steve does one, and then I'll do another one, and we'll see where we go from that. So the first one is: if schools would judge like restaurants by how much customers actually enjoyed the experience, what would change overnight?
I'm not sure schools should be judged like restaurants, because so it's a way of answering but not answering your question. There's a lot of innovation in business shows that people don't know what they want. They really don't know what they think they know what they want, but they really don't know what they want. So Nokia, the Finnish technology company, did push button phones like BlackBerry, and then some of their innovators came along to the CEO and said, "We got this new thing. It involves swiping your finger across a screen rather than pushing buttons." And Nokia looked at it, and they tested it on a few of their customers, and they didn't like it, because most people want a slightly better version of what they've already got, right? And so Nokia said, we'll leave that alone. We'll carry on. People like pushing buttons. We're going to carry on pushing buttons. So off they went to America on the West Coast. And you know the story from there. And Nokia went down the tubes because somebody else took over the big idea. So I think we should ask people what they're liking, and we should pay attention to it. And we shouldn't give them stuff they hate. We shouldn't give them terrible food, and we shouldn't give them terrible learning. But we should also think there's sometimes things that they don't know that they like yet, and we need to find ways of it. So perhaps we need restaurants that you go to and you don't know what you're going to get until you get there, and then you should rate it. Perhaps schools should be a bit like that as well.
What is the most dangerous myth that educators tell themselves to avoid real change?
Say that again.
What is the most dangerous myth that educators tell themselves to avoid real change?
It's I can't find a form of words for it, but it's the belief that they can't do it. And they might give various reasons for this. The parents won't want it. The kids don't like it. and my colleagues will shame me, or they'll mock me if I do this, or the exams don't allow it, or right. So you can name any number of things, and it's just various versions of the belief that things can't be changed. If you try to change them yourself, it's probably a fairly accurate diagnosis. But all my work, since we've not talked about my book today at all, on the making of an educator, living through and learning from the great education shift, is a lot of that book is how I got interested in the importance of collaboration, partly through what I studied, and partly through being gifted a couple of good hands very early in my career as an academic, where collaboration was not very common then, and it was with other academics in my 20s. It was with the Oxfordshire Education Authority in my early 30s, and the research all backs it up. You're more likely to be able to take on that myth if you do it together than if you take it on by yourself.
Love it. Love it. Final one. If a 10-year-old asked you why they have to go to school, what would you actually say?
Well, first of all, it's the law. So you know, if you don't go to school, it's illegal. So you need to go. I'd love it if your school son or daughter, or whoever they are, is when you go. So I'd ask, are you getting these three things out of it? Does your teacher like you? And do you like your teacher? That is the first one. It doesn't mean they always agree with you, or approve of everything you do, but do they like you? Do you learn something new every day? So you come home and you feel you know something today that you didn't know yesterday, and that is really interesting. And have you got friends? Do you feel there's more than one or two people you can hang out with and do interesting things with, and you feel valued to them? If all those three things are true, I can't understand why you're asking the question. If you are asking the question, then there's a problem with at least one of those three things, and we need to get into that, me and you together, and see what we can do about it.
Every now and again, we have done 300 plus episodes, and every now and again you get to a point in your score. And I'm going to go back to my old saying of we could do this all night when we used to record only on evenings. Like, it's one of those things, Andy, where you just look and you just think, there isn't enough hours in the day to kind of go back. We 100% will have you back on.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute delight. And I know you said we didn't mention the book, but The Making of an Educator is obviously your newest book, but there is a massive plethora of information in terms of your authorage. And is authorage even a word? I made that up, I think. But ultimately, the books that you've written and I think it's been an exploration to demonstrate why people should buy the book. It's not a sell. What it is actually your vast knowledge, your experience, and everything that you put into the books that you've written. And this one is a case of, well, if you like what we've had a conversation today, you'll definitely like the new book. We and Ben are not a commission, but we love these conversations because it goes around the book in regards to your expertise, rather than just, I've written something that just on point. I've written a new AI book because this is research, this is experience, this is all of the things that you have done for such a long period of time that comes into the real quality of the book. And we'll come on and we'll do a specific thing, but it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I've loved it. I've learned so much. I've listened to your stories, and one of my favourites, and definitely in the last 12 to 18 months, I'll and beyond. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Ben. Both of you.
Thanks for joining us, Andy, and we'll see you again on another episode of the Edufuturists podcast.
Bye-bye.